Well, good morning. We are ready to start once again with the Georgia House Rural Development Council meeting. And we just want to welcome all of you back again. I know we're going to have a lot of people shifting out. We understand that with meetings with FEMA and GEMA and some of the election processes that are going on. We're glad to soon have that behind us. But just welcome once again. And I'm going to call on Reverend Corbett once again to start us off this morning with prayer.
Thank you, and y'all bow with me. Dear Lord, again, we just come before you as we can know, well, Jesus, we know how. Lord, just thank you for this beautiful day you've allowed us to see. Lord, just thank you for the ones that are here. Just pray a special blessing on each. Lord, just ask now you just, again, be with the ones that was hurt and the ones that were killed in hurricane, the ones this terrible accident over on the island, Lord, over on the coast. I ask you just be with those families, Lord, and just comfort them. Lord, just pray now that you just lead, guide, and direct us today, and everything that we do will be pleasing in thy sight. And all things we ask in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. We appreciate that. This morning we are honored to have an individual that is well known in the agricultural arena. I've known him for a long time. In fact, he's really, I consider him one of my constituents there. Bob Redding is here, and he's president of the Redding Farm, and he's going to talk to us about the Farm Bill.
Thank you so much for including me in the program this morning. I'm a native of Edison, Georgia, just south of here, and I think may still be in Representative Green's district. It's close anyway, close enough. But I originally went to Washington through a University of Georgia Institute of Government program with Sam Nunn. That was many years ago. But I've worked in the ag space on both the House and Senate sides for Georgia members involved in the authorization committees as well as appropriations. The appropriations piece is really important here to grasp as we move forward. This morning, I want to talk to you about three buckets, really. The big one is the Farm Bill, but there are two more. One we have to address soon that's come up recently, and a third one. Those are agricultural disaster assistance. That is a product of Hurricane Helene and other, even last year, disasters that we never put money in to pay for at the federal level. One that you may or may not be familiar with, agricultural economic assistance. This was based on what growers across the U.S. and definitely in southeastern Georgia faced relative to high input cost and low market prices. And then, of course, the 2024 Farm Bill. Let's see here. Thank you. First, let's take a look at ag disaster assistance. I want to do a quick review of Michael before we move into Helene and some of the needs we need there. They're very similar as far as needs. The technical changes that we should have had post Michael and what we went through in late 18, 19, even 20, they've not been taken care of yet. We're still operating under the same laws post Michael that we faced as far as things we have to change. Now I want you to look at this. After Michael, Emergency Conservation Program, there are 3 layers of payments. That's going in, growers going in, let's say cleaning up an orchard. You have to have a visual check from the local Farm Service Agency. I want you to think about that in the hurricane counties and how difficult that would be when offices were not accessible, fields or orchards were not accessible. This was waived after Michael. We had a struggle here. It took us 4.5 days to get a waiver that a visual by in-person Farm Service Agency staffer had to occur in that orchard before you could go in and clean it up. We were able to get it approved on the Thursday. President Biden was down in the Lake Park area. We had a WHIP program then. That was the vessel for emergency or disaster assistance. It worked pretty well. It was the second generation of emergency disaster payments. But important for Blueberry this time, important for pecan last time, and pecan this time, the WIP tree loss program. That is a Farm Service Agency payment for a tree. You lose a tree, there was a variation of payment. I think the top end for, let's say, a 20-year-old pecan tree that's worth a lot of money and producing a lot of nuts was somewhere in the $300 to $350 range. Then the Tree Assistance Program, I know Representative Dickey and others are familiar with that program. The TAP program, the problems we had with hurricanes and tornadoes even before in middle Georgia prior to Michael, the problems are still there now. Georgia has a very high mortality test, 23%. The federal test is 15%. The state adds another, not you, but the state FSA committee adds another, I think, 8 points to that. That's a tough test to meet in some orchards, particularly as you move through and you have growers that are, smaller growers. We had to change it in the law for 1 year in an appropriations bill to get that straight. We cut it in half to 7.5% for 2 years in a row. The big issue for Georgia, because you had a successfully run block grant program after Michael, and I think it was somewhere around $240, $250 million flowed through the Georgia Department of Agriculture. That's what we need again, particularly for specialty crops. Row crops can benefit from it too, but traditional WIP Plus, and I'm going to talk about ERP in just a second, the traditional emergency disaster programs in agriculture work well through the Farm Service Agency if the guardrails are in place. If the guardrails are in place. So let's take a quick look at Hurricane Helene needs. The first steps after these hurricanes is to go ahead and check the Risk Management Agency or crop insurance box. That works for pecan and blueberry. They have decent crop insurance programs. But there are technical things that are wrong. And these are the things that if RMA, Risk Management Agency, can't cure or correct, that we'll have to do legislatively. There will be some. For pecan, they have production insurance available, tree loss insurance available, and a new product since 18, hurricane insurance. The problem, after production insurance, this stuff's expensive. So when the crop insurance slides it across the table and says, now that you bought production insurance, let's take a look at some of these other products. They're just too expensive. So they still have, despite Michael, in Georgia, a low participation rate. On the vegetable side, we had the Risk Management Agency administrator and the deputy administrator and the Georgia team for RMA down in that Lake Park area in Willacoochee looking at every commodity that took a big hit this past week. Vegetables is really an outlier. Some products don't have crop insurance available. The crop insurance available for vegetables typically in Georgia are expensive and growers are reluctant to take them out. So we struggle even to find growers in the vegetable space that take out crop insurance. So most of the farms we go to are people that don't have it as an option or look at it and say, it's just not worth it. It would be worth it for that 1 year, but not every year. So that is a big issue rolling into no farm bill yet, no reform of crop insurance, and all of these commodities are right where they were in 2018, except for hurricane insurance, which has a low participation rate. Livestock and chickens hit, few alternatives other than some type of disaster program. And we were talking about earlier before Chairman Green kicked it off here, the timber guys really struggle. They don't have a mechanism to pay them, no crop insurance, and we'll need some type of ad hoc disaster program. Okay, process. Congress comes back November 12th. We have a continuing resolution, fiscal year 2025 appropriations legislation through December 20th. So sometime between November 12th and December 20th, an appropriations initiative should move. If it's another continuing resolution, we're going to have a problem in the disaster space. But if we do move the bill, which we're all hopeful, that's where we'll plug in the hurricane disaster assistance. The block grant option is critical. Now, I will tell you, I've had this conversation with Commissioner Harper. There are a number of surrounding states that have not had a lot of success with the block grant. One, they've never had a block grant post-hurricane, similar to Michael or other, that had a lot of money in it. We had a lot of money available with Secretary Perdue there that we wanted to pull down from. So we needed it to work, and then Commissioner Black did a great job in putting together a team, advisory team, and it definitely worked. It's the only way to take care of underinsured irrigation systems that flip over, uninsured irrigation systems, barns not insured, underinsured, labor to clean up. This is the place to get it. Plastic for vegetable growers, for example. Going into pecan grove with heavy equipment to move trees out, driving over irrigation systems. That block grant is the only place to cure that. You want it to go through that particular piece. And finally, most importantly, no payment limits. This storm is going to increase the size of Georgia farms. We're going to get bigger, not smaller. The little guys in eastern Georgia, I know in pecan there were several hundred small growers hit. They don't have the equipment to even clean it up. So those are going to be more inclined not to go again, to get rid of the land, lease it out, do whatever they're going to do. These farms are going to get bigger. Payment limits will continue to be a struggle for agriculture in the Southeast, and in particularly Georgia and Middle and South Georgia. The Emergency Relief Program, that was the WIP plus replacement. At first it really worked. Then it didn't work. Last year, the way it was structured, very few of our growers were able to, large growers, particularly in the specialty crop space, got very much out of it. So if Congress uses that for row crop, worst case specialty crop 2, then we're going to have to put some significant legislative guardrails in an appropriations bill. That's hard. I don't know at the state level, but at the federal level, that's very hard. You get the money and you get a few sentences describing what you do with it. Tree assistance program, I mentioned the mortality rate earlier, and crop insurance reforms, we'll have to take care of that. Now this one is what we were working on before Helene, pretending like it didn't come. We had a large, unprecedented fly-in with row crop commodities. We call them Title I commodities, commodities with farm programs that have been waiting on a farm bill. We're operating now with a 2018 farm bill for the 2024 crop. It's not worth much for this state. In the Southeast, these reference prices, target prices, the prices that determine whether the program triggers are very low. Some of the data for those programs are as old as 2010. So 2024, you're operating with 14-year-old data that set your reference price for your farm program. That's why they're not triggering. High input cost, low market prices, you're in the worst possible case. So that's kind of where we are with that. Trade deficit, I had my staff pull the numbers, but we are right back to a trade imbalance for agriculture. Agriculture for years was an industry sector nationally that pulled other industry sectors across the line. We had a surplus. We were selling more than we were importing. Not now. And unfortunately, the secretary described it this way. We have an imbalance of trade. We're importing more than export because we're importing a lot of fruits and vegetables that are healthy products. Well, guess what? Who does that kill? It kills the southeast part of the U.S., including Georgia and South Georgia, Middle Georgia. These products are coming in, seasonal imports, fruits and vegetables, blueberries, squash, cucumbers, peppers, and others are coming in when we're trying to market products. We've been unable to cure it. The last administration, Secretary Perdue, U.S. Trade Rep Bob Lighthouser, made a real effort, including getting language on the table discussed in the U.S.-Mexico-Canada trade agreement to cure it, to stop that, to have something for these growers that would allow them to sell their product during that narrow marketing window. Mexico opposed, of course, then Canada joined in with them because there's blueberries coming to the U.S. and other products, and we lost it. We then had the blueberry growers in Georgia to raise $2 million. They hired a Georgia law firm to go to the International Trade Commission, taking a case there to try and shut this down. lot of this got political with the presidential election. Bottom line is the ITC flipped on us and voted against it. No cure. In the case of squash and cucumbers, there was an investigation, came out with a good report, a lot of data that we used, a lot of data that affirmed what USDA and University of Georgia College of Ag economists had told us. But at the end of the day, no cure. So here we are. There's no trade agreements moving in the Congress. We don't know about the next Congress, what it'll look like. No trade agreements are moving. We have one issue that we can deal with relative to this particular one on seasonal imports, and that will be trying to either get it in a farm bill, I'll talk about second, or trying to tag it on appropriations to give these guys some type of assistance for their losses. All right, don't get too fixated on this. This is data that the Minority Senate Ag Committee economists put together based on Congressional Budget Office analysis, but you can kind of get a flavor here of where the money is shifting to. Commodity programs, Title I in Georgia, corn, cotton, peanut, soy, rice. Well, we don't have rice, but soy. You can see we went from, in the 18 bill, which we're still operating under, if you just took those policies and flipped it, we've dropped from 7% to 4.5% of what is now will be $1.5 million, 1.5 trillion spent on the farm bill. You can see the piece there, 81% projected last year for will be in nutrition growth, 81% versus 77% last year. And it's so big, that's what's taking up the cash. Conservation has grown some. That number is going to change, I think, before we're through with that. But you can see commodities and crop insurance both dropped, which are really what our production ag guys, that's what they do. On the farm bill, policy needs. Reference prices have to go up. If they don't go up, if you're in production agriculture, we shouldn't do a farm bill, okay? Just shouldn't. That's the only thing they get out of it. They get out of crop insurance, but if you're in the Title I, particularly if you're in the cotton and peanut space, you need those reference prices to go up. And we're in that belt here along with specialty crops, vegetables, some fruit. Crop insurance reforms, the House Ag Bill, House Ag Committee passed bill, bipartisan. Sanford Bishop, Democrat from this district, crossed over and led 3 other Democrats on the committee, including Don Davis in North Carolina, to vote with the Republican majority to pass that bill. So it's out of committee. We felt like it had a good vote, but it hasn't been considered yet. It'll flow to lame duck. There'll be an effort. I don't know if it'll get to the floor for a final vote. There's going to be an effort to try and move it. The 4 corners, we call them, the House chaired G.T. Thompson of Pennsylvania, David Scott from Georgia, ranking member, Debbie Stabenow, chairwoman of the Senate Ag Committee, and John Bozeman, ranking member, have been talking. And in the Senate, that is huge progress. It had not been a lot of work done on this other than a staff effort. So we're hopeful that the bill will move in lame duck. We need it to move, but we don't need to freak out here. This will be for the 25 crop. If it's late for the programs we're interested in Georgia, in production agriculture in the Southeast, we can still do the 25 crop. That's what we're shooting for. But note, even if we pass it, it's a great bill, none of these programs, if they trigger, none of these programs will pay anything until October of 2026. October of 2026. That's how it works. So, thus the necessity for the economic assistance. If they don't do that, you're going to have a 3-year gap, at least a 3-year gap, where Georgia Title I production ag growers do not receive any payment. And in this environment with input costs going up and not coming far down, that's a problem for a lot of your districts. I mentioned the Tree Assistance Program. The House bill did all these reforms that we're going to have to try and do in the appropriations bill with Helene. Market Access Program, I mentioned earlier, we have a trade imbalance, importing more than exporting. All of your commodities want to sell more stuff. We need to sell more stuff. We're growing a lot of it. Market Access Program has been at $200 million a year for a decade plus. We've had pecan 10 years ago did not get export MAP money. They get about $1 million a year roughly to try and open new markets like India. The House bill doubles it to $400 million. That would be huge for these smaller associations that are working with USDA to be able to hire consultants to sell their products in these other countries. The House bill includes a doubling of that, which is what all of the production ag guys asked for. Research is always at the end of the list. Everybody's for it. Everybody. All the commodity groups, nutrition groups, ag groups are all for it, yet it's what's left over. And we really neglected a lot of our, as you know, land grant, university research efforts, infrastructure. The House bill does contain some cash in for infrastructure, which we hope we can hold this and have some precedent for it. Nutrition, we have to figure out, because nutrition's really grown since COVID, huge at the federal level. I showed you the SNAP, but it's other programs too. There's a lot of flexibility and choices, but commodity groups are going to have to learn how to take advantage of federal nutrition programs. This money's being spent, they're eating, they want more of the products you're growing here in Georgia. That's going to be a critical piece for us. Conservation is going to be very contentious as we move forward with the Farm Bill. I think all sides agree we want to capture some of the money that came out during COVID that went into climate and put it back in the Farm Bill, so we'll slide it in our baseline and we can use it later, but what's done with it is still in play. Now I want to wrap up here. In the House, I mentioned lame duck. We'll try to move it. Commodity groups are pretty solid together as far as we need to move the bill forward. You know, there's something in there for all commodities and specialty crops, so there's a lot of interest there. In the Senate, less activity. Staff and members are meeting now a little bit, but I mean, we're tight on time, really tight on time. So it's going to be very difficult to move it for the holidays, but generally all of ag is behind taking care of it. I know I rushed through this, but I'll be glad to take any questions or comments, try and answer them.
Bob, where's the sunshine?
Well, I think the lame duck session, if you invited me back here, well, I probably wouldn't come if we don't do anything, but those three buckets, some of that has to take place. The disaster assistance is not going to happen by magic, unfortunately. I sat in Austin Scott's office when he was talking to some members after Michael, and you would be surprised at the hurricane belt outside of Georgia that was hit. We had members in the House, same party, that were saying, that's a lot of money, you know, let's slow it down a little bit. We've already had some appropriators talk about, let's roll it to first quarter. We don't want to miss that Christmas train. Y'all know how it works. If you have a huge appropriations bill moving before the holidays, we need to be part of it. You don't want to miss it for any of this.
Bob, I'm not sure some of our farmers can hang on till all of this. This is one of the worst years that they have experienced. They're having very great difficulties getting loans to continue on. Fertilizer, everything has gone up, chemicals, and John Corbett and I have been talking about some of the needs of our farmers and how many we're going to lose in Georgia. And that's the sad case scenario there. Do we have other individuals that want to ask Bob? All right, Lynn, Chairman Smith.
Representative Lynn Smith from Newnan, Georgia. Thank you for your depressing presentation.
Thank you.
You're not on yet, so.
There, okay. Thank you very much. Where I sit, my area's gone from just small town, we were rural, but now we're being absorbed by Metro Atlanta. And I've found that the discussion on issues that are important to the agriculture section is less important to the city dwellers and people like that. I see a trend of there's not a sympathetic buy-in a lot of times when everybody here tries to make the point this needs to be done. So that's my concern. I don't know that there's a magic anything there to make that happen. But the other trend I'm noticing is that our small farmers are not able to hang in there. And so are we trending towards corporate farming who has bigger money, bigger base, or what do we look like in Georgia as this? Because 2026 is what I came up with after you talked to us.
Unfortunately, as you know, there's been a lot said by urban members, a lot of urban members about we want to help the small farmers, but not the big farmers. I was on a call yesterday with the secretary, a group of commodity groups, and he kept emphasizing that, and I may mess this up, but 90% of the growers receive, 10% of the growers receive these benefits when we do these programs, particularly Title I. But 10% are producing, and there's arguments about this, 80 to 90% of the food we use or eat. And it's going to be a problem. I will tell you, I mean, I've never seen Georgia Bankers, American Bankers Association so engaged on this farm bill and on the economic assistance. Every fly-in we've had, I do several commodities, but peanut, pecan, there are bankers in the room with them. Some farm credit, but the rural banks are engaged and are focused. And yesterday's meeting, we had the both Farm Credit CEO and a VP from the American Bankers Association. But the landscape's going to change. I drove from, we had a Democrat from Ohio, urban member, on the Ag Committee with Austin Scott and Sanford Bishop and here in Leslie for a farm tour earlier this week, on Monday. And driving from Moultrie to Leslie, there were 4 auction signs, all different for smaller tracts of land. Now, you don't know the exact scenario of that, but it is changing, and we're going the opposite way. But the farms that, are active in these groups that are leading the policy are large, but they're large family farms. You have multiple generations. Corbett's an example, relatives of Representative Corbett down there. Just one example, we visited in the hurricane with RMA. You have multiple families. The Minor brothers here in Sumter County are large farmers, but it's multiple families involved in it. But that is a transitional piece. They can't continue at this level. Land's worth too much, and there are places, other things to do with it, rather than basically eating your equity away.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Chairman Taylor.
You got it.
Okay. Thank you.
There you go.
I guess this goes along with what everybody is seeing and feeling this morning. How do I say this? They've been barely hanging on. This has been a rough last 4 or 5 years. It's never an easy industry to begin with. Sometimes I feel like the attitude of the urban versus the rural is having a major effect, and as there has been population shift, that's affected. I don't know, do they need to have empty shelves again after COVID? I kind of feel like when Eisenhower said, it looks mighty easy, farming looks easy when your pencil's a plow, or your plow's a pencil, and you're 2,000 miles from the field. Do they have any idea what will happen if their shelves are empty? Because it feels like that's what's going to happen. I don't have all the answers. We're putting a lot of money in SNAP, which I understand there are people that are hungry and need it, but there'll be less that can be produced because they're shifting where the money's going. It's the same thing with a lot of different parts of the government, but is there any understanding at all?
Some, but it's limited. The original nutrition, then food stamps, commodity program agreement was in the 70s with between Herman Talmadge and Hubert Humphrey. Same party, but Dems control both bodies. That has kind of morphed to where we are today. David Scott, who's ranking member, he gets it. Sanford Bishop gets it. Don Davis gets it. But this urban-rural split is really only, I'm getting out of my lane here, increase the partisanship issue that we have. We used to have, regional differences on ag. That was the fight. You get in committee, didn't matter what party you're in, it was what state you were from. Southeast stuck together. Texas was with us, basically battling Midwest on row crops, California on specialty crops. That part has not changed, but the partisanship piece on it is only taking votes away from those regions. The other piece to this that's changed, I think, that is difficult to get, and I've talked to Dean Place at the University of Georgia a good bit about it. We have a real battle in regional land grants. When I say that, the Southeast has been, helpful to commodity groups and addressing economic analyses, and people listening and farm groups that are probably represented here. We get a lot of data from UGA, Fort Valley State. Same happens with Alabama guys with Auburn, Tuskegee. But we have land grants in the Midwest. Illinois is an example. I don't mind calling them out. They're publishing every week a document called Farm Doc. They come after the Southeast, publishing, the farms are too big, they're getting too much money, they're not telling you this, they're doing better than you think. And those, it's all public information, free, but that has not helped us. And that battle has been going on since the 14 Farm Bill, but it's increased. We were up to 2 documents a week coming out from Ohio State and from Illinois, blasting these farm programs. And Southeast, how much they benefit the Southeast. So it's a pretty, it's a difficult environment to put these packages together. The hurricane is only going to make it more difficult.
Thank you.
Okay. Chairman Corbett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Redding, for the presentation. Thank you for what you do for ag here in Georgia. We learned some lessons from Michael. It took 2 years before any federal help got down to the ag community in southwest Georgia from Michael. And this ag disaster assistance bill, the programs out there, the block grants, I think is vitally important that we get that passed. So my question is, what can we do as legislators, state legislators, to help our congressional delegation get this across the finish line?
I've had several legislators have called, and definitely on the Senate side, about that question. I think staying engaged in supporting Commissioner Harper's efforts on the block grant, showing that we're one team, bipartisan in that effort, that will be critical. And that will be the delegation and other delegations looking to see that. That block grant is not partisan. The only way we're going to be able to do the unique things that we have to do in the state of Georgia, because you're so diverse as far as commodities you grow, farmers are more diverse here. We're not growing just corn, wheat, and soybeans. We have more than one piece of equipment on these farms. It's expensive. It's different here. Climate's different. So I think supporting them, we have 13 counties that did not make the hurricane cut, yet if you drive through those counties, they don't look any different from the Valdosta region. Those 13 counties have not been designated in the hurricane list as of yet. That will matter with regard to risk management agency and crop insurance qualifications. That might be a bad result. If it is, we have to stick together, state officials and the Land Grant University, who's supportive, because they're going to have the data that we try and refute, leaving those 13 counties out, trying to change it. It will be hard, very hard. So that's an important issue. That's in our face. We had ECP cleanup issue for a week, the first week after the hurricane. The next challenge for all of us will be those 13 counties and whether or not they qualify. Those counties, I don't know this legislative districts as well, but those counties are all in Rick Allen and Buddy Carter's district. I don't think Austin had any of those.
Are there other questions? Bob, we certainly appreciate you've taken the time because this is so important to all of us in Southwest Georgia and throughout the state of Georgia, and especially since the hurricanes have just lifted a lot of the issues before us. We will certainly stay in touch with you. This committee will draft a letter to our congressional delegation doing exactly what you want us to do in regard to the block grants and other issues there. Thank you so much. And I think you're going to be around in just a few minutes if some of them.
Yes.
We're going to take a 5-minute break to adjust some cameras here. So we're going to take about a 5-minute break, and we got coffee and other things over here.
Thank
Okay?
you.
Thank you, Bob. Yeah, if y'all will come back to your seats, we've got the problem taken care of now. Matt, I'm going to let you do the introductions here and start us off on this. And so if you would just take over there. This is Matt Seal, President and CEO of Douglas Coffee County Chamber and Development Authority. Did I get it all in?
Yes,
All right.
it's a
All right.
mouthful.
It is a
Chamber and
mouthful.
Development Authority
I don't know how
combined
you
have
get
to
it
do
on
that.
your badge.
It very difficult to do that. It's just says my name, Matt Seal. That's it. So, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Members of the council, thank you all for letting us come and speak to you and be a part of the program this time around. Again, Matt Seal. I'm the CEO of the Douglas Coffee County Chamber of Commerce and Economic Development Authority. That's the whole thing. And I'm proud to be joined by my board president, Mr. Stuart Smith, president of the Douglas Coffee County Economic Development Authority. In addition to serving in that role, he is also the president and one of the founding members of Douglas National Bank, and I challenge you to find a more community-oriented bank in the state of Georgia than Douglas National. In addition to, I know we had Georgia Bankers Association give a presentation yesterday. Got a lot of talk about farming communities, and bankers have a good bit to say. So he's a great wealth of information, insight on what it's like in our community, and of course some of the surrounding communities from a banker's perspective. First, I want to say we had hoped to host you all in Douglas for yesterday and today's sessions. Obviously, Hurricane Helene left a little bit of a mark, and so our ability to host was diminished. We look forward to hosting you at one of these sessions, hopefully next year. And we really look forward to demonstrating what a resilient community Douglas and Coffee County is. That's actually part of what we want to talk about today. Again, just look forward to welcoming you to Douglas. And I just want to give a personal thanks that several of you on the council and in the crowd have reached out and contacted us personally. And the show of support to Douglas, Coffee County, so many of the surrounding communities. Obviously, Valdosta got a lot of the attention right off. Of course, it's a bigger place, and so the news cameras went there first. But very quickly, we were able to get some attention in our community, and the show of support we got, just truckloads of supplies coming in. My favorite thing to brag about is the pastor of the Douglas Methodist Church is a former Army logistics officer, which came in very handy recently, and so he turned his church into a distribution hub. We had outstations in some of the smaller communities and unincorporated communities in Coffee, and then, of course, to the surrounding communities, too. So it's nobody would wish this on anybody, but the humanity and the togetherness we get to see as a result of some of these catastrophes kind of makes us have some hope, and it's those things have been the things very nice to see about our community and so many communities across the state. The issue we have before you today, we're going to talk about natural gas, specifically infrastructure. And I'll start by saying we're not asking for any funding. We're not asking for an appropriation. That's not what we're here. We do have a couple asks, but they're legislative in nature. And I knew I'd get smiles and more attention if I opened up with that, because I know there's a lot of needs that are very much financial in nature. Ours is about being able to control our own destiny, taking things into our own hands and being able to do so not only as our community, but with other communities in our region. We'll get to some more of that. But the title of this is about industrial recruitment based on natural gas. And I thought the best way to illustrate that was a story I like to call The Rise, the Fall, and the Rise Again of Pilgrim's Pride. Pilgrim's is a major industry, one of the top employers in our community, but has impacts regionally because of the chicken houses, the contract farmers. And I was going to ask Mr. Smith to kind of give the tale. He was very involved in some of the history of this, and so I've asked him to kind of this story of how it impacts our community, both sometimes in a negative way when we don't have what we need, but then also in a positive way to build things and increase prosperity for our citizens. So, Stuart.
Thank you, Matt, and thank you all for letting us speak with you today. I don't know if many of you here may or may not have known Francis Lott, but Francis always preached how special Douglas is, and he's right. Douglas is special. We have a rich history of economic development going back 45 plus years. We've developed and built out 4 industrial parks. We've sold multiple spec buildings, all of this without a major interstate, because our community works together, our leaders work together, and we've had a lot of successes in that area, and a lot of people say we're an example of what a rural community should do that wants to control its own destiny. And 2 of the industries that come to mind, the successes that we've had over the years relating to natural gas and agribusiness, is Premium Peanut, which is the largest shelling processing facility in the world, right in our community, and also Pilgrim's Pride, which Matt mentioned. Pilgrim's has a complete ecosystem in Douglas. It has the processing plant, the feed mill, hatchery, 500 plus poultry houses, 70 farmer owner growers, and it's a huge part of our community. And recently we announced the opening of a pet food processing facility, which is a $125 million investment with 75 jobs. This opened about a year ago. So Pilgrim's Pride is a huge part of our community. About 2,200 jobs are affected, 900 direct jobs, 2,200 altogether. But as Matt mentioned, this facility closed in 2009, and it was a huge blow to our community. But the community came together. We raised money. We also raised millage rates to fund the Economic Development Authority to try and find a buyer for the plant. And fortunately, about a year after it closed, we were able to find JBS out of Brazil, who came in and purchased the facility, expanded it, invested. And it's been a huge success and a huge win for our community. And but I think overall the point is, if either one of those facilities we were trying to recruit a Pilgrim's Pride or a Premium Peanut today, they may not come to our facility because we have challenges on natural gas. And it's a very important issue for our community and the region. And we appreciate you giving us the opportunity to raise that issue today, and I'll turn it over to Matt to detail what the issue is and our plan to try and solve it. So thank you.
And really, just Stuart mentioned the new facility, pet food manufacturing, $125 million investment, 75 new jobs. No one's district represented on this council would turn that down. That's a huge impact. Now, maybe in a metropolitan area, that might, as Clay Perkle likes to say, that's just called Tuesday in Atlanta. But in rural communities, it's a big deal. That pet food manufacturing facility, got some numbers from our city manager, Charlie Davis. All the demand that just built up over the previous 60 years doubled the day they turned on that facility. And it got us close to the end of our capacity for natural gas. Not because there's a shortage of natural gas anywhere, but because of the infrastructure and our ability to get it to our community. I'm gonna go into more details of that. But the hardship for us is, and I've had to turn down at least 2 RFIs that come to us from our utility partners from the Georgia Department of Economic Development, because we lack the ability to provide the natural gas being demanded by a new industrial prospect. So I'm having to not put us in the running for the next $125 million investment and 75 new jobs in Coffee County. And of course, we employ people. We are very much a regional hub for the 7 counties that border us. So the farther we get without fixing this problem, the more issues we're going to have about our economic development. I can't stress that enough. So that's our big issue. And let me go into the details here. I'm going to have to crane my neck to see what my slide. Basically, just to give some overview, and I'm not going to read each number or anything. You guys understand there's 3 types of customers. The residential customers for natural gas is by far the highest number of customers, and that smallest number at the bottom of the slide, or the bottom of that section there, the number of industrial customers is the lowest, but they end up using the highest volume. And if we can't feed another one of those new potential customers, then all those residential folks that we're trying to increase the prosperity for, we can't give them higher paying jobs, more jobs, and our growth is just really stunted, at least in that regard. There are three main pipelines. So as far as distribution, you have three main companies that handle the pipelines distribution of gas. And then there are two investor-sponsored companies that are utility providers for gas. And then at the bottom of that side, you'll see there's 80 communities like Douglas. And I was previously the mayor of Osceola. Osceola did not provide its own electricity, but did provide its own gas. You know, there's 49 communities, MEAG communities, that are our own electricity providers. There are 80 communities, municipal gas providers. And I can tell you, as a former mayor, not being able to do electricity, but being able to do natural gas, that was a huge revenue generator for us, of course. And we actually did 2 expansions in Osceola to provide gas for people that requested it, but we just had to extend our reach. Those are really good investments, but we're limited in how much we can do without one of the asks I'm gonna have for you at the end. It's just really important for us to have the ability to access resources, the ability to, again, control our own destiny, not just as those individual communities that are sometimes small, but the ability to collaborate with neighboring communities and do things on a regional basis. We've already really just, with Stuart's example, talked about the importance of natural gas. It's the biggest, the industry's customers are the smallest number of customers, but the biggest users, and it just has so much more importance. If a household, for some reason, because they're out of reach or, you know, whatever reason, can't get natural gas, they'll just live in a house that's got heating and cooking by electric, and that's not a big deal. If we have an industry prospect that we say, I'm sorry, we can't provide this natural gas capacity for you, they go somewhere else. And that's just going to have a big impact on us. And I'll say this too, it's obvious, I mean, so many of your communities will have a cotton gin, a peanut buying point. Those are big gas users right there. Those aren't the heavy loads like we're talking about, like a manufacturing facility, but those are folks that are using gas. And if we want to grow, and I know Commissioner Harper probably said something about this yesterday, I missed his presentation, but he's very big on how do we build industries that are related to ag? How do we do things that create more value with those raw material agricultural products in the same communities to create wealth and prosperity in rural areas? In a lot of cases, we're just not going to be able to do that without making sure we've got our natural gas capacity. All right, so this the graphic here just shows you, this is the actual pipeline that feeds the city of Douglas and Coffee County. This is not the only pipeline, it's just the one that feeds off of us. So you see it goes through southwest Georgia, starts in Alabama, and then goes into Florida. So let me give you a little bit of a description of our line. We're on a lateral. It's currently owned by Kinder Morgan, but they are very open to conversations about selling or partnering with us on some things as far as expansion, upgrades, and capacity. So that lateral starts in Albany, Dougherty County. That lateral feeds Worth County, Tift County, Irwin County. There's another line that comes off that lateral to feed Fitzgerald and Ben Hill County. And Jason Dunn, my colleague in economic development in Ben Hill County, is with us today because he's got similar capacity concerns as we do. And then that lateral actually ends, I learned this fun fact in doing all the research for this, it actually ends in Irwin County just shy of the Coffee County line. Now, Coffee County 25 years ago, more precisely the city of Douglas, since that's the utility provider, actually put in their own line. So they own the line that comes from just inside the Irwin County line all the way into Douglas, Coffee County. And they actually are, if you know Polk Vineyards, it's just on the west side of Irwin County, they actually receive gas from the city of Douglas as a utility. So they've spread that, and that's the skin in the game. That's come from their investments over the years. Here's the part where there's a capacity issue. That lateral from Albany all the way over to just about the Coffee County line is a 4-inch line all the way there. Jason, I believe the line that goes up to Fitzgerald is actually a 3-inch line. The one that goes up to Ashburn and Turner County is also a 3-inch line. There's a little extra in Worth County, same kind of thing. And to build for growth and to be prepared for the future. 25 years ago when the city of Douglas did this, they put in a 10-inch line because we wanted to grow. So we've got a 4-inch line that dead ends to a 10-inch line. Now my city manager, Charlie Davis, has joked that actually ended up being a very convenient because there was a disruption some time ago, and because we had all this gas in a 10-inch line, we didn't have a disruption. Luckily that was short term. That's not a really good storage setup, but that ended up kind of working to our advantage in that particular instance. But that's the line that is the limiting factor for Coffee County, a regional hub for employment, for industry. That's going to limit us moving forward into the future. A little bit of history of some legislation we've tried before, and then our asks. Because yes, I've got 2 asks, and neither one of them are funding. House Bill 1294 last year, sponsored by our state representative Clay Perkle, who wasn't able to be with us today. It allowed GFA programs funding to be used for natural gas infrastructure. The issue we ran into with that, there is nothing that says GFA can't be used for natural gas, but there's also nothing that says it can be used for natural gas. Natural gas is the similar types of infrastructure as water and wastewater, which is exactly what GFA programs go to help, especially rural communities. I've benefited from that. Again, as the mayor of Osceola, we had 2 programs from GFA that allowed us to expand our water system and wastewater. And so what this bill did, it was essentially just made it direct. Hey, this can now be used for natural gas. It just made it very clear. It didn't change anything. It just made it kind of clarified. This bill had no issues through committee. It actually, I like to joke, it passed the House twice and the Senate once, just not ever in the same form. We started a little late in the session, and so we weren't able to get it across. I've been encouraged by some of you to make some disparaging comments about your brethren and sister in the Senate, but what I'll say is the Senate is a fine legislative body that just had too many high-quality House bills to deal with, and they weren't able to get to this particular one. I'm on a recording. I got to make sure I do that. I'm a recovering politician, like I told you, Mr. Chairman. So what we're asking is that and we see no specific changes to this. There was no issues. There were no controversial or people have any kind of issue with the bill. It just made something very clear that likely is allowable now. It just makes it clear. So we're asking for the Rural Development Council to support passage of a bill that we hope to introduce earlier in the session to make sure timing is not a factor. The second part of this is we're going to be asking for a regional development authority, a joint development authority. I've mentioned 7 counties, including Coffee, that are impacted by that particular lateral. And there are multiple options. We've explored options in conversation, but until we have a framework, a structure to enact those, whether that is accessing GFA funds that already exist, not new appropriation, capital markets, there's all kinds of opportunities, and we'd like to pursue those together as a region. That's not something that is practical for one community on a pipeline to do without involving the others, and a development authority of that nature would allow us essentially the structural framework to pursue some of those options. So those are the 2 big asks. Again, this capacity will just stop our ability to grow for anybody that needs natural gas. I know that Jason Dunn and Fitzgerald has had similar conversations. His capacity is at an end. Our ability to expand current industries, and of course the easiest thing to do to create more jobs is expand somebody there. We have this expansion. Pilgrim's the example we just talked about. That was a major expansion, an increase in jobs, and we were able to do that because we had the capacity. If the same opportunity comes to me right now, I can't do it because of this one single issue. So I can't, again, stress that enough. So, Mr. Chairman, that concludes my comments and everything, but I'd, of course, be open to any questions or comments from anyone on the council.
Absolutely. Thank y'all. Yeah, that's something that was brought to the Rural Development Council, and certainly Representative Perkle was carrying the water there, and he really was passionate about it. And so now we're going to look around on the council and see who would like to carry it again. I bet we can find someone on that. Do we have any questions? You did a great job explaining, and we appreciate that. We appreciate y'all coming and what y'all are doing down in there.
Thank you.
And our prayers are still with y'all, and as y'all do the recovery there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank y'all very much. The next up is Thomas Carter. with the Georgia Development Authority? Okay, please. And you can either sit or you can go to the podium.
Well, I've been sitting for a while, so I think I'll stand up.
All right, very good. Well, we're glad to have you this morning.
I'm glad to be with you this morning. This is probably one of the first times I've been able to get out and speak since COVID struck. And now we all have Teams and Zoomitis, and we don't get to meet too much together. But does anyone here know what the Georgia Development Authority is? Oh boy, okay. Yeah. I'll give you a little history then, since not many people know what the Georgia Development Authority is. By the way, I'm Thomas Carter. I've been the executive director of the Georgia Development Authority for about 12 years now. And prior to that, I worked for 30 years with the Farm Credit System. And so I've really enjoyed working with the Georgia Development Authority because we provide an alternative source of agricultural credit. Now, a lot of times we will get phone calls and such from people wanting us to help develop a subdivision or some sort of a big high-rise development or something, and I have to let them know, no, we don't do that. We make farm loans. And we started out from the federal government back in 1934 during the Depression. And they started the Georgia Rural Rehabilitation Corporation in the state of Georgia. And it was to help to revitalize rural communities during the Depression era because everyone was leaving the farms and leaving the place unknown. But then in 1949, the federal government decided to give the money back or give it to the state of Georgia. So at that time, the Livestock Development Authority was formed by the state of Georgia to facilitate using this money. So we started out Georgia Rural Rehabilitation Corporation. We then in 1953 became the Livestock Development Authority. Then in '54, we had a merger and we became the Georgia Livestock Development Authority. And then in 1957, right after I was born, they became the Georgia Agricultural Development Authority. Now that's a more suiting name for us than the Georgia Development Authority. But the legislature, in their wisdom, in 1960 decided to change our name to the Georgia Development Authority. They left it out. So to this day, we still operate under a use agreement with the USDA, and we have to let them know how we're operating every year because that $1 million, that was our seed money to get going. And so we report to the USDA every year and let them know that we're not being unworthy stewards of that money and that we are using it appropriately according to the purpose in the use agreement for agricultural loans. I ought to tell you too that our board is comprised of Commissioner Tyler Harper, Mr. Pat Wilson with Economic Trade and Development, Mr. Greg Griffin, I believe Greg spoke with y'all yesterday, State Auditor, he's one of our ex officio board members. And then we have 4 named by the governor, and so we have a good board member. Our board members comprised of Steve Stipe from down around Waycross, he's a banker. Glenn Honeycutt from down in Moultrie, he's a crop insurance man. Mr. Steve Singletary over in Early County, he has been one of our solid rocks for years and years, and he was with the Bank of Early over there in his farm operation. And let's see, who am I leaving out? Mr. Bill Brim, one of my favorite ones we've got. He's in the Lewis Taylor Farms down in Tifton, Georgia. So that's our board set up, and we're very fortunate to have an excellent board. it got changed around when Governor Deal went out. And that brings me to one of the things that I'm really proud of what the Georgia Development Authority has been involved in. When Hurricane Michael hit, it left a lot of devastation. And it kind of makes you want to say it's deja vu all over again right now with Helene coming in. But at that time, you know, Commissioner Gary Black was our chairman of our board, and he got with the industry, ag industry out there, all the representatives and senators. Oh, I forgot to mention one other, Senator Russ Goodman. Russ Goodman was one of our board members at the time the hurricane hit. And he went off the board when Governor Deal changed our board. Right at the time we were working on a program for the hurricane assistance, which I'm going back to now. But we all got together. Commissioner Black got a good bunch of people together. We were able to get going pretty quickly. We looked at other states' programs, and I was looking at Florida first off because that's, you know, Hurricane Central down there, and they should have the best things. But at that time, their previous programs, they outsourced it, and it did not do a good delivery. And at that time, one of the predominant factors was we needed to get the money out very quickly because it was going to take so much time to get insurance money, federal assistance, and things like that. And at that time, people were trying to get ready to get their operating loans going. So we devised this program, and now keep in mind, at that time, the Georgia Development Authority only had 7 employees. And so I called on 3 other people who were retired credit people, very experienced, and we hired them part-time contractors to help us with the workload. But we were able to really get a loan program together, a $400,000 loan program for these victims of the Hurricane Michael. Hurricane Michael hit on October 8, 2018, and we began taking applications for this program December 30th. December 20th. And by February the 6th, we had booked our first loan. So that doesn't sound like much, that sounds like a long time, maybe to people who are not in the lending business, who are trying to get a program going, but we thought it was very fast. And by the time May came around, the 29th, we had booked our last Safety 21 loan. That's what we called the Hurricane Michael Assistance Loans, were our Safety 21 loans. And thank you to the state of Georgia, our House of Representatives, the governor, and the Senate for providing us with $75 million to go out there to these victims. And they also provided another $20 million to the Forestry Commission for a forest debris management program grant situation. And we also worked with the Forestry Commission on that. They didn't have the capability to disperse the funds for that thing, so we dispersed the money for the Forestry Commission because we had all the software intact to do it, and it worked real well for us. So we find ourselves, well, I kind of give you an idea of what we wound up with. We closed 276 loans to Hurricane Michael victims for almost $75 million. We almost got to the dollar there on the total $75 million that was allocated to us. So 276 loans were booked, but the sad thing was we had 182 applications that were left unfunded at the time, but you know, that's the way it goes. We were very apprehensive about the loan program being paid back, because, you know, according to the gratuity clause with the state of Georgia, we can't just give the money away. We have to loan it out, and it has to be repaid. And at the time, we were expecting super high delinquency rates, maybe in the 30% or 40% range, because of the state of the economy in those areas and the state of the people. But it turned out to be very successful as far as the repayment of it goes. And we let's see, at last count, that 276 loans paid down to 257. So we've got 257 on the books right now at a little over $63 million. And we're in the process of working with those customers, because the way the terms were set up, they would balloon in 2026. And so we've worked up a plan to deal with those customers to extend that term out even farther, another 13 years in this case. So what that left us with was I told Commissioner Harper, I said, we've got the wheel, but we need to change the tires on it. We've got the wheel to make another Safety 21 loan program in effect for these Helene victims. And so we're in the process now. We don't have any money allocated to us, but other than what we've got on the books already. And we've probably got close to, we got about 18 million on one side, and it comes up to about $25 million we've got available that we could start lending out when we get the mechanism to do it to help these Helene victims. Now, that's a drop in the bucket, and we're hoping that we can get some money from the state to run through that loan program to help these people. That's what we've got in the back of our mind. Even though we don't have enough money to really help right now, we're in the process of getting those tires for that wheel to get this thing going, a new loan program to help people so that they can stay in operation and get their operating loans for next year. To kind of give you an idea about how big we are, we're not very big, but we're self-funded. The only money we get is money for special programs like this Safety 21, $75 million that we got from the state. Other than that, our regular loan program and our operations, we're self-funded. We're not in the state budget, and under ordinary circumstances, it's extraordinary when it comes about. But to give you an idea, with all of our regular type loan programs, and we've got beginning farmer programs, we just came up with an agricultural value added loan program to help people with plant processing, abattoirs for livestock processing, things like that, because when COVID hit, we were having problems with people getting meat, vegetables, and stuff like that. So that program came about as a way to try to help local people do some processing and distribution of their farm products. But anyway, that's our AVALP program. And so when you consider all our total loans, it's 304 total loans that we've got on the books, just regular stuff that we fund out of our regular operations. And it amounts to a little over 116, almost $117 million right there. And then you add the 257 Safety 21 loans that we've got, that's another 63 million. So total what we deal with is 561 loans for almost $180 million. And we handle that with, we just got a new employee and put one on half-time, so we've got 7.5 employees right now handling that. And so we're probably going to have to get some more people, though, to deal with some of these situations which we're going to encounter with Helene coming in. I don't have much of a program other than that. This has been a terribly busy month for us. October always is. And then when you get the hurricane situations we've had pop in on us, that really takes a lot of time. But The best thing is, anyone have any questions that I might answer for you?
I think you're going to have some here. Chairman Yerler.
Thank you for being with us today. Are your rates, interest rates below market rates, basically, is that?
They've been, sometimes they're up and sometimes they're down, because we basically price ours out off of the U.S. Treasuries. We price them different every week with a spread over the U.S. Treasuries. So if you look at the Treasuries, you can kind of see how our rates will go. We were getting in a situation where the banks and farm credits were really in there better than us at times. And then there's times that we get better than them. So it comes and goes as far as the desirability of getting a loan from us for solely a rate reason.
Do you operate in a similar fashion to them with collateral and all,
Oh, yes, sir.
Okay.
On our regular loan portfolio, not counting those hurricane assistance loans, we require a first lien on farm real estate, and we try to keep our loan to values around 75%. In some cases, we can ease up to about 80%, but we have to have some really strong offsetting factors.
And you mentioned that some of the
Yes, sir.
how many did you say were already paid off as opposed to still owing?
I didn't hear you.
You mentioned the balloon coming in 26 with the hurricane, dealing with Hurricane Michael, correct?
Yeah.
What percent did you say were still out there owing and
I didn't
and
have
paid
the
off?
percent figure, but we paid down from 276 loans down to 257.
Okay.
Yes, sir, down to that.
Okay.
But I don't have the percent figure calculated for you.
Okay, and you're talking about maybe extending those, doing a program to maybe extend those, is that correct?
The ones that are on the books right now, the board met the other day and we've decided to extend the terms up to another, another 13 years. That'd give it 20 years altogether, but the amortization would be 33, because when we started the program originally, it was a 40-year amortization, and it was to be very helpful to the cash flow of these people.
Sure.
And that's the reason Commissioner Black wanted to go with that 40-year amortization.
Okay, thank you.
Chairman Corbett, and then I'll get you, Chairman Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Carter, for your presentation. I think, and Michael, you said we appropriated $75 million and $20 million to forestry at that time. And I think the numbers I've seen, the ag industry got hit with like $6.4 billion loss this time, which is about triple what I think they had with Michael. So would it be reasonable to, if we appropriate money, that we could anticipate, 3 times that we appropriated for Michael? Would that be a logical assumption to do that? Or is that
Yes, sir.
a good place to start?
Yeah, but we were 182 loans short to start with, so we
yes.
really could have used more money with Michael. But that said, 3 times would be a lot better than going in with the same amount.
Yes.
Because this thing was, we were talking about it yesterday, we just couldn't get over how big it was in relation to Michael. And we've got a lot of facility type things, talking about Pilgrim's Pride earlier. They took a tremendous hit with all these poultry houses. And that's a little bit different than a row crop. It doesn't rebound as quickly as a row crop operation would be. But even though we've got a lot of row crop situations over there too. But yeah, it's a sad situation. It's so much bigger. We didn't think about it the day after the hurricane, but we're finding it out.
Chairman Williams, did you have
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation today. Did you say the maximum loans that y'all were doing were $400,000, or is that just that the
Yes,
average?
sir. That's the amount on the Hurricane Michael assistance loans were 400,000.
And you anticipate that'll be the same for this one, or might
Well,
be
we
three
were
times
talking
as like?
about that also yesterday at our board meeting, and it's going to depend upon how much money we have available. If we don't have a lot of money available, we're going to have to bring that 400,000 down to try to help more people. That might have been what we needed to have done to start with, to not leave so many unfunded applications out there, those 182 that we had.
So if some of our constituents come to us and say, hey, we need money, is just give them y'all's number?
Yes, sir, that would be fine. Now, keep this in mind too. If someone is in very bad financial condition, there are credit factors involved with the program. So, and also if they've got an operating setup with a bank or a farm credit, we want to make sure that that bank provides continuity for them. So on the last loan, we required farm credits, and the bank and whoever were supplying the operating funds for a row crop operation, we wanted them to sign a continuity agreement saying that they weren't just going to take the money and then cut the borrower off and leave them hanging. So there's other factors involved, and it's not just here it is. We had a minimum credit score, I believe, of 600, which is that's lower than the 620 for housing things.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Have you had conversations with the governor's office yet, or is it too soon to not know what we are faced with in regard to our losses?
Right now, Commissioner Harper is the only access I've had to information like that, and he's since he's chairman, he's been very proactive in trying to help us get this thing going.
You know, we were
And
Chairman Corbett and I were just thinking that 3 times that is not. It's just going to be a drop in the bucket for what's happened to these areas, because it's not like Michael. Michael was mainly agricultural crops and things that was destroyed. This is this is quite different. It encompasses a lot more
right
on that.
Facilities and infrastructure, all kinds of things are affected by this one.
So I've got a feeling that you're going to be spending some time at the Capitol with us.
Well, I'd be glad to.
Well, I know you would, and you've got a great board member with Steve Singletary. He's a fine individual that I enjoy working with in South Georgia there. Yeah. Do we have any other questions? All right. Thank you so much. I bet they know what you do now.
I think we're going to have to get somebody to change our name. Commissioner Black, he changed his logo to look just like the GDA logo, which he was on the board and approved to start with. And now, so we're getting confusion between the Georgia Department of Agriculture and the GDA. In the Linden circles, GDA was, you know, farm credit people always knew who GDA was, but I think we need to throw agricultural back in our name. Georgia Agriculture.
Well, talk to us.
Thank you. It was good to get out and talk to people again.
Well, it was good to have you here today. We really appreciate it very much. Thank you.
And I'm going to run on, if you don't mind, because my wife is homebound, and I just managed to get someone to stay with her to come down here. She broke up a telephone.
We appreciate that.
But anyway, thank you.
Well, thank you, Chairman Green and the rest of the members of the committee. It was great going to dinner with y'all and meeting you last night and having a great meal, and I appreciate the time. And as I promised Chairman Green last night, I'm going to keep this to about 15 minutes, not the 30 you allotted, so we're going to kind of get right to it. So what I wanted to do is actually start with the punchline and kind of give you the end, so as we're going through the presentation, you can see what this is really all about and what it does. And it really does two things. These types of districts fund public infrastructure, and they give us a tool to maintain public infrastructure so that none of this is on the backs of the state, the city, or the county. It's a great development tool that's being used all over the country. So those are the two things to keep in mind. We're going to only get two powers: fund public infrastructure and maintain public infrastructure. And to us, it answers a couple of questions that Georgia has problems with, most states do. And one is attainable housing, and the other one is, how do you fund infrastructure? Chairman Green asked me a question last night at dinner and said, does this fund apartments? And the answer is no, it doesn't actually. Apartments fund their projects a different way. They do it off of a cap rate, off of net operating income. This is not what this is for. We have very few apartments in Florida and these other states in these districts. This is used for single-family subdivisions, master plan communities, some mixed-use project, things of that nature. And by the way, I'm going to throw this out. One of our biggest clients in Florida is Rayonier Timber. I think a lot of y'all know Rayonier in Georgia. They've offered, we have a pretty giant master plan community using one of these districts just north of Jacksonville in Nassau County called Wildlight, 24,000 acres. They have just started, just created the district a few years ago, issued the first couple series of bonds, and they would love to show any of y'all around how this district concept works and how they have been able to put in infrastructure, again, at no cost to the cities and the counties, and look at the finished product that you're getting from these folks. So we just talked about one of the main issues. So as you guys know, it's affordable or attainable housing. We like to call it attainable housing because, again, it's not apartments. Everybody's seen the headlines around Georgia. So I like this little history slide. A lot of people didn't know that Benjamin Franklin started the first special district of the United States back in 1736. He created the Union Fire Company, and people that paid assessments got fire protection, and those that didn't, I guess their houses burned down. But this was the first special district in the country. Last night, just for the fun of it, I Googled how many special districts are in the U.S., and the most recent stat I could find was 52,000 in 2017. So this is a very common tool being used to finance and maintain different types of things around the country. So what are your neighbors doing? So this is a great slide. Until last year, the only two states in the Southeast that did not have this tool were Georgia and Tennessee. Tennessee just passed it in the last legislative session. So if you look at the map, everybody in blue are the neighboring states that have a version of this law now, and we would really like to try and promote this in Georgia in this legislative session. So again, what does it do? It does two main things. It gives us two main powers: the power to finance public infrastructure, again with no burden on the city, the county, or the state. It gives the developer the tool to finance the public infrastructure. And then the second thing is maintain public infrastructure. Most developers will dedicate for ownership and maintenance to the local city or the county or utility provider roads, water and sewer pipes, things like that. We still do that if that's what the city and the county or the utility provider want. But there's occasions where the city or the county don't want dedication. Maybe the road's not built to their standards. They certainly don't want stormwater because they don't like the liability. So with this tool, we now have a governmental entity that can own and maintain these infrastructure items. And we maintain them very well compared to an HOA because our assessments go right on the property tax bill. It's going to get paid, you're going to collect the money, and you're going to be able to maintain these assets. So what is it? You know, we've kind of talked about this. It's a special purpose unit of local government. It was intended for planned community development and meet infrastructure needs. The sole purpose, again, is just finance, construct, and maintain public infrastructure. The important slide or bullet point on this page is number 4. It's created by the approval of the local government, whether it's the city or the county where the land lies. The cities and the counties still have control. to approve or disapprove of one of these type of districts. So, you know, we're not usurping anybody's power. We have to go to that city and that county with a petition to create this district in the first place. What can we do? Think about it as basically any of the infrastructure that's horizontal on or below the ground. Roads, bridge, water, sewer, stormwater, sidewalks, streetscapes. It's all of the stuff that is the bones of a subdivision or a development. Those are the types of items that are publicly owned, and therefore we can issue municipal bonds. That's how we finance this. So again, these are the public infrastructure items that are legally allowable. We could also do parks and recreation, trails, green spaces, off-site improvements that are demanded by the city or the county. Any of these off-sites that are part of the development order become legally financeable under this technique also. And as you guys know, a lot of people will try to do a development out in the country and they got to run 2 or 3 miles of water and sewer line, or, you know, add turn lanes or accel, decel lanes. All of that qualifies for this type of financing. What I'm going to do is I'm going to skip a few slides to try and keep on schedule, but this is stuff we've just talked about. What can we not do? This is important. We cannot take any action that's inconsistent with the cities, the counties, utility authorities, their comp plans, their ordinances, their regulations. Again, I pivot back to what I said earlier. We only have 2 powers. We can finance public infrastructure, we can maintain it. We can't usurp any city, county, utility provider authority or ordinances. We must abide by building codes, land development codes, all city, county rules, regulations, and policies. And at the very bottom, with the utilities. Governmental utilities, we still have to deal with them. If they want the dedication of the water and sewer lines free of charge, great. We fund it. We dedicate it to the city, the county utility provider free of charge. Key here, the debt that we issue is never constituted as a burden of the local city or county. Because we're a governmental entity, it's the debt of that entity. It's kind of like an IDB authority, you know? So it is a separate debt that doesn't in any way affect the current citizens of that city, that county. It doesn't go on the books of the city or the county. It is a separate governmental entity. So benefits, you know, who benefits from this? We got the developer, we got the city and the county, and we've got ultimately the residents or the end users. If you look at the developer, he gets a lower financing cost and the upfront financing that banks will not supply after 2008. After 2008, you can't go to a bank and get an A&D loan for a development. The real capital stack for developers now is private equity, with interest rates ranging from 12 to 20%. Versus trying to go to a bank. Under the city and the county, our mantra is always growth pays for growth. Again, the growth of this development is going to pay for this development. And then again, the city or the county can accept the conveyed assets if they want them. And then finally, the residents. If you guys have driven down in Florida, you go along, you know, if you're in the Panhandle, you go to 30A and Seaside in that area. A lot of those communities you're driving through, like Alice Beach, Watercolor, Water Sound, those are these districts. You probably wouldn't have known that, but these districts, that's how they're funded. But what we're saying here is you get higher property values. Because we're able to maintain the infrastructure and the amenities at a higher level, it maintains better property values. So at the beginning, I figured this would be a good slide to stop on for a second, because what we talked about is attainable housing, and we talked about public infrastructure. So I've been beating the public infrastructure to death. Well, how do you do attainable housing? And it's really pretty simple. And Mr. Carter kind of mentioned something a minute ago in his presentation I heard. He said, hey, it's a lot easier to pay for your debt over 40 years than a shorter amortization, right? Well, the same thing here. There's 2 things that happen. One, today's bonds in this type market are about 5.5%. As I said earlier, the developers fund with private equity ranging from 12 to 20%. Well, there's your first savings right there. That's obvious, borrowing at 5.5 versus 20. Okay, but that's not the big one. The big one is this. So let's use some real numbers. In Florida, kind of a common number that you'll see in Central Florida assessments. We'll lay off maybe a $1,500 assessment per year for 30 years to fund a share of this public infrastructure. Well, if we do that, what we're going to do is we're going to pull an equivalent amount of public infrastructure cost out of the lot cost, okay? So if you do a present value calculation of 5.5% for 30 years on a $1,500 payment, you're going to get about $22,800 in debt. Net of cost of issuance and capitalized interest, you're netting $19,000, $20,000. So in theory, the developer now can lower the cost of that lot. Let's say it's a $50,000 lot. He could lower it from 50 to 30. He's still getting the money, but he's getting it from the bond issue. The homeowners are still paying for the infrastructure, but they get to pay for it now over 30 years. They're paying $1,500 a year as opposed to $20,000 up front in the lot and the housing cost. That's how you get your attainable housing. Interest rate is the first way. The bigger way, we're pulling the cost out of the lot cost. We're bringing the cost of the lot and the housing down. That's how you really do it. And that's why it's being so widely used in these neighboring states. Florida's kind of the leader. We started this with a law in 1980. We have over 1,000 of these CDDs now. My company alone manages well over 200 of them, and we've got another 30 or 40 in formation this year. So it is the way that Florida grows. It's the way that Florida pays for a vast majority of its infrastructure. One thing that's an interesting factoid that we're starting to see is we've talked about the ability to maintain infrastructure. Now we've got a few counties that don't have a written policy, but they kind of have an unspoken policy, like Clay County, southwest of Jacksonville, Marion County, which is Ocala, Charlotte County, which is Fort Myers. These guys are, when they're approached by developers now that want to do at least 250, 300 homes, they're saying, we want you to use a CDD. We don't want to maintain the roads. So we want you guys to use a CDD and you guys maintain it. So it's actually become a great tool where cities and counties have kind of kicked it over to the developer and said, not only will you fund the infrastructure, you're going to maintain it. Just real quickly, they operate a lot like cities and counties. It's open meetings, government in the sunshine, record keeping, all of that type stuff. Protections for the city and county. There's no administrative costs. We've talked about that. We have to follow all your rules. So here's a slide I wanted to focus on. A lot of people are saying, well, how do people know that they're buying in one of these districts? And so over the years, Florida has beefed it up a few times in the law, so there's no way anybody can say they didn't know. And it's a lot of levels of recording things in probate court, so it shows up in a title search. But you start with disclosures in the retail sales contracts. By law, and what's in our draft bill, same as Florida, same as these other states, there's a bold black paragraph right above the signature block of the buyer that says, buyer, take note that you're buying in the Twin Creek CDD, and as such, you'll be paying assessments for 30 years. That's the first way. Then anybody's available can get brochures from us as the manager of that district. Now it's even more advanced. We just put it on the website. Every CDD by law is required to have a website with the same outline of information, so we put it there. And then the recordings. So when we form a district with that city or that county, we record a notice of establishment in probate court. We then come back when it's time to levy assessments, the assessment lien, and we record the notice of assessment lien. And then finally, when we issue bonds, we come back and we record the disclosure of public financing. All three of these things are in the probate court. They're in the records. Every title company sees it on every search. Nobody doesn't know that they're buying in a district. It's very transparent. And then finally, we talked about websites, and again, all of our meetings are open and noticed. And that's it. I told you I'd try to keep it to 15 minutes.
You did. What I'm wanting to know is taking the idea of a rural setting where the infrastructure is terrible, where there's how would that we would have to build an infrastructure completely in a county, and at the same time start the process of the homes and everything. How do you go about contacting the people to come that want to buy these areas? Is that your role to do that?
Usually, most of the clients that we have are the big national and regional home builders and the national and regional developers. They're the ones that are really marketing that, hey, I'm bringing this 300 unit first time home buyer subdivision in what used to be a pecan orchard here in my county, that type stuff. So, we're helping them figure out how to finance it, and those are the guys that are advertising it, trying to bring them in.
I know that the Speaker of the House and I have had conversation about this. In fact, we were going down to visit a particular one of these in Florida, and the hurricanes just changed our direction there too. But this is something that we're very interested in the rural settings, instead of solar farms, instead of those things, to put people, retirement type, is that a proper way to say it, or retirement settlement into these areas? Because we do not have the industries to work, put these people to work really in some of these rural settings. So it would be mainly a retirement type situation. Am I right?
It is both, and it's used widely in Florida for both markets, whether it's a first-time homebuyer market or whether it's what we'd call a second or third move-up market. So both of them work. And frankly, to be honest and blunt, they use the financing tool differently. So we're talking about attainable housing right now because that's the big problem, okay? So the way I described it, you lower the price of the lot, you lower the price of the house. That's just math, it works. But you go into some of these big retirement communities like the Villages and places like that in Florida, and what you're going to see is they also use that $20,000 payment or money that we give them, but they use it differently. They'll put more stuff in. They'll put in more amenities, more landscaping, more water features, more of what the people at that price point. But again, right now, I think our biggest target in Georgia is attainable housing. And there's a lot of first-time home builder national builders that this is who they focus on. The D.R. Hortons, the Lennars of the world, Pulte. That's what they focus on. That's probably the biggest segment of the market and the biggest user of this in Florida and most of these states.
Remind me if years ago, Roy helped me here, we passed it in the House and the Senate, put it on the ballot, and at that particular time, there were some issues with the economy, and it was going down, and so it failed.
49-51. And it was November of 08, and we all remember what happened in November of 08. This was like weeks after Wachovia had gone down, Bank of America, Merrill Lynch. So anything that smacked of real estate was a bad thing at that moment. So it was bad timing. But in a way, to me, it's good timing because we brought back a better bill. This bill is the Florida version of the law, not what we had cobbled together back in 07 and 08. I was part of that too. I was there with these guys that far back.
We'd be interested in seeing Florida's bill.
Well, believe it or not, that's what you're getting, because I instructed the lawyers to scratch through the word Florida and put Georgia. So that's basically what we've done.
All right, that sounds good. Do we have any questions? All right, Chairman Smith, and then I'll get Chairman.
So you can see me. Thank you for your presentation. I briefly sort of remember the debate we had back in 07, 08. One of the concerns raised by local governments was if there's a citizen complaint within this development that isn't addressed to their satisfaction, does it become the problem of the city council or the county government?
That's actually a really good question, and that's the beauty behind the Florida law as opposed to like the Texas law. In Texas, the cities and the counties create these districts, they issue the bonds, there is no separate board. So yeah, you get citizens complaining. In Florida, we are a separate government, and they're all educated up front that this has nothing to do with the city, the county, the state. You guys come to our public meetings that are noticed. You bring your complaints here. We, the CDD or the WRID, we address it.
So one of your, I guess one of the bases you base your operation on is consumer confidence, and is important to you. I mean, because we've dealt with some different private entities in and around our state, and we still hear from the citizens when it's not fair, it's not right, and I mean, they don't listen to us. So consumer satisfaction, is that a priority?
It's absolutely the priority, because you think about it, we have 1,000 CDDs in Florida. If we didn't have consumer satisfaction, we'd never be able to do another one. So all of these home builders know that, look, we've got to have total transparency. We've got to set this assessment level at an affordable level for that particular market in that county. So yeah, it's all about customer satisfaction. And one slide I brushed over, these boards are started with 5 landowner representatives, but by year 6, they start turning over to residents of the district. So by year 8 or 12, you've basically transitioned all of your seats to residents that, you know, want a referendum inside the boundaries of their district. It's controlled by the residents.
Thank you.
Chairman Corbett.
Thank you, Mr. Hunt. And you just answered my question. One of your slides showed residents get control over time, and I was going to ask you to elaborate on that, and you just did. So,
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Well, you can see by the questions, Philip, that this is something of interest to us, especially in the agricultural areas and the rural areas, I should say. And so you'll be hearing from us a little bit more, and I know that we can get a hold of you pretty quick through our dear friend over there. Roy can certainly get you for us and everything.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you guys again for giving me the opportunity to present.
Thank you. Thank you. We appreciate it. We're going to take a quick 5-minute break. I understand some of these people need to run to the restroom, like me. Good.
I just followed his lead, whatever it tells me to do.
Jake, we're going to get you up there, and Tim, so we can stay on time here. Ladies and gentlemen, we have the Georgia Forestry Association, and Tim, every time you come to this meeting, you've got a new title and everything. So we don't know whether to invite you back next time or not, because we're proud to have you in this position. He's the president, CEO of the Georgia Forestry Association, and he's brought Jake Matthews along, VP consultant for the government affairs there, and Jake is well known at the Capitol as well as Tim. So it's up to you now, Tim.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, thank you for the invite and for the introduction there. And yeah, I think last time I did speak to you guys, it was last year in Athens. And I was with the Georgia Forestry Commission, and I was talking about some workforce things that were going on there, and certainly appreciated that opportunity. And you know, my daughters, I've got a 20-year-old daughter and an 18-year-old daughter, and if you want the honest opinion on things, you just ask them what you want, right? And so they give me a hard time about changing jobs too. But no, as Chairman Green introduced me, I had the opportunity now to serve as the CEO and president of the Georgia Forestry Association, which many of you guys in this room and know the organization, and are very well familiar with that organization. My previous role was with the Georgia Forestry Commission. I had the opportunity to serve with Governor Brian Kemp's administration for about 4 years as the director of that organization, and certainly was grateful for that opportunity as well. But thank you for the chance to be here today. I know yesterday, my understanding is you had some presentations around ag, and then also had some comments around forestry, and really the challenges that we are facing right now in our state related to Hurricane Helene. And I've got some remarks and some slides on that, and I'll get into those as well. And I'll walk through some of that, and then I'm going to turn it over to Jake and let Jake talk to you specifically about some ideas that we have as an organization going forward that we believe that this council can get their full support behind and move forward with. So we'll walk through those, and then we'll certainly be around for any questions that this group may have. And let me try to work these slides. There we go. Nothing new to this group, and I think it is something that we always, as an organization, like to open up with, and like just to remind this group that Georgia is the #1 forestry state in the nation, and that doesn't happen by chance. That happens by good leadership, which many of you are part of, and just want you guys to be aware that we remain #1 in the nation related to forestry. And really, it all boils down to a few key facts. We are the #1 privately owned timberland state in the nation, meaning that individuals in the room like ourselves own that forest land, care for that forest land, manage that forest land, depend on that forest land for their well-being. We are #1 in tree planting as a state across the, as we compare ourselves to other states in the nation, planting somewhere in the 250 million seedlings a year range. And I would challenge any of you to do that if you haven't done it. I planted 10 acres right out of college, and I learned real quick that I didn't want to do that ever again. Hard work, but I'm thankful for the folks that are willing to do that hard work across our state. We harvest more timber volume than any other state, and then this is something I think that often escapes our mind. We always remember how valuable and important the port is to our state. Something I think that gets lost amongst people when they talk about the port, that pulp and paper and paperboard mill products plays a tremendous role in the types of goods that go out of that port every day in our state, and we're thankful that we have that port. And then obviously you will see, I won't walk through the I guess the right side of that slide. I just want to point out that we grow more trees than we harvest in our estate. One thing that we get talked about or asked about on a regular basis in our sector is the sustainability. We grow 48% more volume than we harvest in this state. So we're adding more trees and adding more really carbon sequestration to our state's forest every year than what we are harvesting and taking away from it. With that, being number one in forestry and being really good at forestry doesn't come without challenges. And I think this slide illustrates one of those challenges that I want to just spend a few seconds on talking about. You ask, what does this mean? These red circles on this chart across the southeast represent recent mill closures. I'll say that again, mill closures that have occurred across the southeast. What's not on there are recent mill curtailments. And if I had those on there, and I apologize for not having them on there, just didn't have an opportunity to get those added, but mill curtailments that are taking place right now, basically just shutting those mills down until market conditions improve. You would see circles like Meldrum, Georgia, which is Savannah, a suburb of Savannah. There's a large sawmill there that is curtailed. You would see Thomasville, Georgia, that we have a sawmill there that is curtailed. And then there are other mills that have reduced production, sawmills that have reduced production. And that's taking place purely, these mill closures and those curtailments are purely being driven by demand for the product right now in our country and across the globe. One of the other challenges that we have that many of you have talked about, okay, you're going to help me out here? Yes, sir. Just hit play. One of the other challenges, aside from what's going on in the market, the current market conditions and market trends in our business, is one that when we all went to bed, I guess it would have been September the 26th. No one had any idea what kind of catastrophic damage we would wake up to on the 27th of September. And it is a real challenge for our business right now. It's a real challenge for those 92% non-industrial private forest landowners in our state, and that's Hurricane Helene. And I just want to give you a glimpse. Our team has been working tremendously hard to work on the advocacy side and what can be done at the federal level and then also what can be done at the state level. We've also been working hard to hear from forest landowners and the forest product sector about the challenges that they're facing right now. And I just want to take a quick second and just play you a short video that our team has put together to give you a glimpse into some of the damage and some of the challenges that these owners are facing.
In our area where we're at, we've always been pretty safe. We've only lost maybe 500-600 acres to fire over the last 30 years. You know, we have I have fire tractors, bulldozers, the forestry's right here. We do a lot of burning to keep our fire danger down. So there's things you can do to help that, but as far as a hurricane this strong coming through here, nobody's ever seen it. You lose it. If it's a tornado, wind, flood, fire, we have no protection, zero. And that's got to change. We need something to protect our forest lands and to make us want to keep our forest lands.
Landowners are pretty downtrodden, losing the vastness of timber that we've lost, and you know, not quite sure folks will be putting wood back into timberland, which is a travesty. I hope that we can figure out ways to incentivize and encourage our landowners to replant their timber.
Oh, I got it back. There we go. Leo, I got it. Yeah, so I just wanted to give you a glimpse into what some of the stories that we're hearing, and I think that's important because of the decisions that you guys are going to be making as we go forward and how we respond and really how our federal partners respond to the storm damage here. And I think I heard it, one of our presenters just a few minutes ago talked about how, and it was Chairman Green, you talked about how Hurricane Michael and how Hurricane Helene are different. And they've impacted differently. Most of that was ag land and some timberland in Hurricane Michael. And the pathway that Hurricane Helene hit, for us as a forestry community, is the wood basket of our state. It is some of the most productive, most operable timberland in our state. Honestly, it's some of the most operable and productive timberland in the country. Which is why we have such a robust forest products industry in that part of the state. And our challenge is trying to understand how moving forward a response can be appropriate and understands that this storm was different than what the Hurricane Michael was, and the impacts are different. And the response needs to be appropriate and needs to be different and needs to be tailored in a way that allows those, as Mr. Yeomans discussed, those downtrodden landowners will be encouraged and incentivized to put trees back in the ground for a variety of reasons, right? The environmental benefits that we get from trees, the support for rural economies, and then also the ability for Georgia to remain the #1 forestry state in the nation. And I leave this slide up with this picture here because I just want to point out the majority of the damage that has happened to our forest land, although there's some young stands that have been impacted tremendously, but the majority of the stands that have been impacted are these large, mature timber stands and these recently thinned stands like you will see right here. And this is a great illustration because if you look to the left on this slide, that stand there just looks like it didn't get impacted at all. There's some down trees in there, but the stand on the right is just completely wiped away. And this stand on the right represents, if it were still standing, you're probably looking in the neighborhood of $2,000 to $2,500 per acre standing on September the 26th. On September the 27th, when this landowner walked into this, that stand went to probably less than a third of that value, maybe even less than a quarter of that value, based on the way there was so much wood that was down and so much volume that had to be harvested. We anticipate as a forestry community harvesting about 20% of that, and that's very aggressive. I wouldn't be surprised that if we don't salvage, if we're only able to salvage about 15% of the down timber. The challenge that comes with that is this down timber is going back in and reforesting after that timber. If you don't get it salvaged, how does a landowner get that property back in production? You're talking about some astronomical site prep cost leading up to get that acreage back in production. There's just more hardwood stand there that shows you that they were beaten up pretty bad as well. All the way, really the hardest spot that impacted forestry was from Valdosta almost up to Swainsboro, all the way up through Rennes and Jefferson County. Tremendous impact to our forest resource in that region. And I just want to park here for just a second. I want to revisit that graphic that I put up, #1 forestry state in the nation. And I just want to talk a second about that. And I want to talk about something else that I know that's really important to this body and important to your peers, is that other graphic that's mirrored right beside it. And that is that Georgia constantly becomes a #1 state to do business in. I don't think these two #1s are by coincidence. I think they're very closely tied together. They're attached at the hip or attached at the stump, so to speak. And what really makes this work are the hosting conditions that our state enjoys and has. And I think as we go forward, and I say that because I've been on the side in a previous role where we were making decisions about where we deployed capital as a major corporation, and it never that capital was always deployed, or there was consideration given to how the state treated business and how the state responded and how the state helped those businesses when they were in a time of need. And I think I just want to draw your attention to that now there's some things that are going on in our sector in the forestry community related to market, related to consumer demand. Some of those things we can have influence over and we can have control over. And there's additionally, at the same time, there's challenges that are happening from something that we had absolutely no control over, and that's a storm. And I know and I'm confident that this body and that our state leadership, they have been doing it for the last decade. You guys have been doing it probably for the last couple decades, responding to communities and to sectors when they needed help the most. And I know that our membership, our stakeholders that we represent in our association are looking at you now and wondering how and counting on you and the way you respond now to help this community when we need you the most. So I'm going to stop there and I'm going to let Jake come up and talk to you about some of the ideas that we believe and that he thinks that we can help provide an adequate and appropriate response.
Yeah, thank you, Tim, and we're pretty excited at GFA to have Tim joining on board with us. It's been a good few weeks, quite an interesting few weeks with the storm coming through for it to be when you started. But like you said, my name is Jake Matthews, and I get to work with the Georgia Forestry Association, and get to work with a lot of you here in this room. But when you invited us to come and speak here at the Rural Development Council meeting, it was very clear that you asked for bringing actual policy proposals, real ideas and concepts that you all could take to the Capitol with you in the upcoming session and work on. And so that's what we've got for you. Is we've got really three things that I'm going to talk about today that play into what Tim was just talking about with current market conditions, not only market conditions that existed prior to this hurricane that just came through, but now that situation really being ramped up to a whole nother level. So many of you know that in 2023 during the legislative session, you all in the General Assembly passed House Bill 189, and many of you here played a big role in that. That put us on an even playing field with our surrounding states as it relates to the amount of weight that commercial trucks hauling agriculture and forestry products could carry. It changed the variance that have been in place for a long time from 5% up to 10%. And it sounds like a small amount, but as you can see from some of the numbers on the screen here, it's a pretty big deal for those that are involved every day in forestry. Going from 84,000 pounds on a 5-axle truck to 88,000 pounds, which is what that variance increase did, we calculated up what that means for just your typical logging crew. And you're looking at $100,000 to $120,000 in savings per year for that one crew. That spread across an entire sector is a pretty big deal. You look at what that does for taking trucks off the road by adding more weight to an individual truck. We've estimated that's probably about 20 million miles less traveled per year across the sector. And those are just two kind of statistics that give you a glimpse at some of the positive things that have come as a result of passage of that bill. As a part of that, there was a sunset provision put on that bill that basically means July 1st of 2025, it will sunset. And so we would revert back to 84,000 pounds after that date. So what we would propose to you all, and what we've already started having conversations about even earlier this year, all throughout the summer, is to address this coming session to avoid that reduction back to 84,000 pounds. And what that would require is simply striking the sunset from House Bill 189 with a new piece of legislation this year. And that's really all it would be striking that one piece of the bill that is the sunset. We believe that's all that's really needed to be done. Everything with House Bill 189 has really worked pretty well thus far from what we've seen. And so we would ask that of you all to consider doing that this upcoming legislative session. So the second thing that I want to touch on is, and really real quick before I do that, I'll go back to this. This ties into both of the issues that Tim just highlighted. Not only market conditions that existed prior to this storm and helping to more efficiently move product up and down the roadway, but then also after the storm, there are a lot of salvage operations going on. And so people being able to move wood more efficiently during those salvage operations when there's a lot of demand for logging crews to get out on a piece of property, this is a big deal for that. And right now, this is why I went back, I wanted to highlight this. Right now, because of some things that have been done at the state and federal level, you can actually go and apply for a permit through the Department of Public Safety to carry debris or forest products at 95,000 pounds on state roads and the interstates. That has been an unbelievable tool for forest landowners, loggers, everyone involved in forestry right now trying to do a lot of this salvage operation. That's been a really important tool for them. You think about what's going on our state roads right now, trying to get them cleared, get lines back up, getting power poles back up. It was pretty difficult for a while there, even 2 to 3 weeks, to get up and down some of these roads that these folks needed to traverse. And so being able to get off those roads, let those linemen, let those crews do what they needed to do, and get onto the interstate to keep moving product, especially salvage material, was a really big deal. And so we're pretty appreciative of all the folks that made that happen. So the second thing here, after Hurricane Michael in 2018, there was a special session, and during that special session, there was a reforestation program that got passed as a part of that special session. It was House Bill 4EX. And so we can get y'all some stuff that lays out more specifics than is right here on what that bill did. But the gist of it is that it was a $200 million reforestation tax credit. That allows folks to go in, it was contingent upon reforestation, right? So that allows folks to go in and have some help in getting their land back into forestry production. You can see the picture in the background here. That's a lot to clean up. Folks that aren't going to be able to salvage that wood, that's a significant cost just to do the site prep to then be ready to go and reforest, not to mention the fact that reforestation costs are much higher now than they were just 5-10 years ago, or even 2 years ago, really, for that matter. It covered up to 100% of losses on the acre, and losses might not be the right word there. It covered up to 100% of the acreage that you had damage to, but it was capped at $400 per acre based on what that individual could receive. This right here, it passed the House, I believe, with maybe 2 no votes, and it passed the Senate unanimously. And so this particular piece of legislation, we think, has a lot of support already for a hurricane that has already been discussed, wasn't as bad as the one that we're looking at right now. And so we think this could be something that the General Assembly could take and potentially replicate during the 2025 legislative session. It's something that has already been done. There's good precedent in place for it, and it would help tremendously with getting trees back in the ground, helping landowners continue to want to stay involved in forestry. When you've got losses that are this significant that we're seeing right now, this would be something that would be very beneficial. It's very important. It's not a silver bullet by any means. Folks need to be able to reforest, but they also need income. A lot of folks rely on these trees as their annual income. And that's not necessarily something that the General Assembly can take care of due to certain circumstances and the things that y'all can and cannot do. But this right here is something that can be done, and it can be done this coming session. So, and it would help tremendously on that aspect of things. But we've also got to look at how we address that loss of income that took 20 to 30 years to build up. The last, and I'm probably moving a little quickly through these, but we're covering the highlights here. The last thing I want to talk about is really directly related to what Tim talked about with markets. He listed off a few different manufacturing facilities, forest manufacturing facilities, mostly sawmills. And so what they're doing is producing dimensional lumber. What you see here on the screen is 619 Ponce. Some of you have actually been to this building. I believe Chair Lady Lynn Smith actually hosted a committee event to tour this building. So some of you, I know, have been there to it and to see it. This was a picture from a while back when the building was still being constructed. It is now complete, and there's tenants moving in. It's owned by Jamestown, who is also the owner of Ponce City Market. They operate that area. What you're looking at is a mass timber commercial building. It's 8 stories tall. It's got commercial tenants in it now. The bottom of it, I believe, is Pottery Barn. It's the flagship store for Pottery Barn in the United States. It's beautiful. I would encourage y'all to go take a look at it in person. We can help make that happen. But this is all cross-laminated timber. What you see are beams and panels that are kind of been put together like Legos. Those beams are all, think, 2x4s that have been glued and pressed together to create a product that you can build commercial buildings out of. And then the rest of it is panels that, again, are dimensional lumber, 2x4s, glued and pressed together to create what you see as that floor and ceiling. And it's pretty incredible to see this thing go up. There's trucks, just a handful of trucks that roll in with all the material, and then there's probably 8 people that are there on site putting the whole thing together. So it addresses a number of different things. Mainly is the fact that we need some help with our markets. We need to have more outlets for wood. We need more uses for wood. There is a study committee over in the Senate right now that's looking at that. Senator Kennedy is addressing that with his Forestry Innovation Study Committee, and they've heard from the folks recently that were very involved in this. It's pretty cool to get to show everyone what's going on with mass timber right now. We think that this is an incredible opportunity for the state to look at building a state building out of mass timber. That's something that could be done almost immediately. There's certainly things in the pipeline that the state needs to build. I know there's a lot of renovation work going on at the Capitol over the next few years. What that would do is help us in the effort that we're currently underway with, was just to bring attention to mass timber. If we can bring more attention to it, we can get folks more interested in using it. That's really the biggest problem we're seeing right now, is it is a little bit more expensive at the moment because it's not a widely adopted practice in Georgia or in the Southeast necessarily. If you look in certainly other countries, especially in Europe, or if you even look in some other states out west, or actually even closer than out west to us, this is really starting to take off in a big way. And so there's really no reason why Georgia, as the #1 forestry state in the nation, can't be a leader in mass timber construction. And we believe that if the General Assembly took on this concept of building a state building out of mass timber, that could be a really important component to helping us jumpstart this. And again, just goes back to driving more demand for wood, helping us to keep some of those facilities that we've seen have curtailments up and running. And so we think this could be done, and something that we would like to speak with y'all with, and certainly support any efforts to do so. So those are the 3 things we were going to hit y'all with. We certainly have some more that we could talk about, but rather than inundate you with more, we wanted to focus on 3 things that we really think are key this coming session to the success of forestry in Georgia, and things that we know the General Assembly could take on pretty immediately. So, and with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions about those proposals, or if you have a question about, some of the damage that we've been seeing for Tim, I'm sure he'd be happy to come back up as well. So.
Okay, thank you so much. You and Tim certainly outlined it well, and your proposals are well taken here. Representative Lisa.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your presentation, both of you. You mentioned with regards to the truck weights bill that just striking out the sunset would be agreeable with you all. Does that include that 13 county amendment that was made on the Senate side? And could you just comment if there has been any issues with that as far as moving timber around, and do you see that as being a problem going forward, or has that worked out pretty well for our foresters?
I think, and it's a great question. So there was a provision in the bill that dealt with a non-attainment zone. which excluded, I think, 13 metro area counties from having trucks haul at the higher weights in those areas. We haven't had just overwhelming amount of grief over that. There's certainly some capacity in and around those counties for forestry, and then I know also for other industries throughout the greater ag economy that certainly do haul through those counties. And so it's not necessarily what we would want it to be, but we believe what we have currently is very good and is sufficient. And so if that's, you know, a breaking point, if you will, it's not something that we're necessarily extremely concerned about. And we'd have to make sure that, you know, everything was right on how that would be done as far as just striking the sunset. But that's probably the best way I can answer that right now. Yeah.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Do we have other questions? Chairman Corbett.
Thank you, Jake. Thank you, Tim, for your presentation. Mine's on the, I guess, House Bill 40EX, the $200 million Tax Credit Reforestation Act. Was all $200 million of that utilized, or was there one money left, or could they have used more?
It's a great question, and I was trying to think about that as some numbers were talked about earlier about it being, you know, Hurricane Helene being 3x what Hurricane Michael was.
Right, and that's
so. From my understanding, out of the 200 million, 49.5 million is what got used. That's what got applied for and utilized by actual landowners. So certainly less than the 200 million that was allocated to it. But if you think about some of what we've talked about preliminarily, you know, we'd want to continue to bring in numbers to it. But if you think about it being 3x what Hurricane Michael was, you're actually getting pretty close if you were to do 200 million again.
And if I have, say, if I have $100,000 worth of losses, but I only can utilize, you know, 50,000 this year, can I use the other 50,000 in subsequent years if I have gains to?
I believe it carries forward for 10 years.
For 10 years.
Was in the original legislation.
I think it did.
Yeah. But to your point, though, if you took what was utilized during Michael and 3x'd it, you're getting pretty close at 200 million. So we think 200 would be probably the appropriate number this time, rather than saying 600. Right? That would be probably way overboard.
Way overboard. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
And we want to make sure that the Forestry Association is quite aware, as we have tried to protect our #1 industry as far as forestry goes here in the state, that counties are moving in the direction of trying to get around what has been done. And I know, Jake, you have been working on an issue that I brought to you concerning that, and I hope we are still working on that. I know that Farm Bureau is interested in that particular proposal, because this is something that is spreading throughout the state, and we need to be aware of it and see what we can do to compromise with some of these individuals.
Absolutely, yeah, and thank you for bringing it to our attention. We've certainly heard from members of ours about it, and look forward to working with you on what we can do.
Good, good. Do we have other questions, any ideas? Well, y'all did a great presentation, as always, and we look forward to working with y'all in the coming months at the legislature. And we just thank y'all so much for what you are doing for our state.
Thank y'all for having us.
Thank you. Y'all, I'm going to give y'all the final announcements here. Our final meeting will be December the 4th and 5th, and we will have a similar program where we will begin on December the 4th, Chairman Smith, at 1 p.m. and come back on December the 5th at 9 a.m. And our final meeting will be hosted by Georgia Southern University in Statesboro. And on December the 5th, we will review recommendations for the final report that will be submitted by the end of the year. And we want to thank once again Georgia Southwestern State University for all that they've done, and thanks to all of these individuals that have stayed with us during this time. We appreciate it. And we want to do a quick photo with our members here. And then we're adjourned. Did I get it all in?